Well, good morning everybody. Welcome to sunny Galashiels this morning. Thought I'd do a little bit of a look back on something a little bit more straightforward than some of the advanced chord construction. To have a little look at some of the history of music, and the reason I've got these two books here is because these two are incredibly important books. Hopefully you can just about make out what it says on the spline there. It says Bach 48 Volume 1 and Volume 2. What's so significant about these two books? If I open the first page, it says here, and I'll translate, it says The Well-Tempered Keyboard by Johann Sebastian Bach, and this is book 1, and as I say that's book 2. The word well-tempered always sounds a bit funny. It makes it sound as if you've got well-tempered keyboards and bad-tempered keyboards, and I presume bad-tempered keyboards are the ones that keep playing the wrong notes. But no, joking aside, the word well-tempered, it simply refers to the fact that previous to the books of Bach, if we look back at the history even further back of music, something that we now accept as the norm was not the norm, and that is the fact that our black keys, which are known as sharps and flats, at one point in the history of music they were not the same notes. So F sharp and G flat were not considered the same note. F sharp was a note slightly higher than F. G flat was a note slightly lower than G, which if anybody's heard a beginner on the violin, you'll appreciate the need to get the intonation spot on, because you can make an F that's a little bit sharp and it's not quite the same as an F sharp, and you can play a G that's a little bit flat and it's not quite the same as G flat. But of course on a keyboard it presents a problem having these two different notes. There are some very, very old instruments that do actually have two black keys, a larger black key and a smaller black key at the side, in order to give you the two different notes. But as I say, that was all dispensed with by the invention or the concept of the well-tempered keyboard. And in order to promote this new idea, one of the things that Bach is particularly famous for is for writing the Great 48. Why is it called the Great 48? Quite simply, because we have 7 white keys. If I go from C to B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, we've got 7 white keys and we've got our 5 black keys. That gives us 12 notes on which to begin a scale, and therefore 12 keys that we could write a piece of music in. You've then got to bear in mind that you can have 12 major scales, but there are also 12 minor scales, because for each major scale there is what we call the relative minor. It's easy enough to find the relative minor of any major. If you go to the 6th note of any major scale, that will be the starting point of the relative minor scale. So for example, for C major, the 6th note of the scale is A. That is the starting note. I'm going to play on this occasion the A natural minor scale. A natural, not because it starts on A natural, because the type of minor scale that it is known as a natural minor, as opposed to the harmonic minor. And then we also get the melodic minor. might have noticed that the changes that occurred were that in the harmonic minor, the 7th note, G, was altered and made into a G sharp, whereas in the melodic minor, on the way up the scale, ascending, the 6th and the 7th note were raised a semitone and then brought back to normal. So in other words, we did the natural minor on the way back down. Okay, so we've got 12 major scales, 12 minor scales, hence one book of 24 preludes and fugues, followed by another book of 24 preludes and fugues. That's one for each major and minor key. Okay, so focusing a little bit on the major scale. What's very important to remember with any scale is that it is a series of 7, and then back to the first note, 7 consecutive notes. Every letter name needs to appear once apart from the note you start and end on, which of course appears at the beginning and the end. And that applies to writing out the notes as well. You have to have the scale going up one step at a time, from the line to the space to the line to the space. So for example, in the C major scale, it goes C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. And of course, in our music, Western music, we are more than familiar with that as being our do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. And of course, to a lot of people, it sounds as if we've simply gone up by the same step each time, because we've gone from one white key to the next, to the next, to the next. However, you'll notice that there's no black key in between E and F and B and C. And that means that the actual step from E to F is a smaller step. It's what we call a semitone. It's the equivalent to starting from C and going to C sharp. C to C sharp is a semitone. C sharp to the D is a semitone. Those two semitones to combine to make a full tone. So C to D is a full tone. D to E is a full tone, but E to F is only a semitone. F to G, obviously a tone. G to A is a tone. A to B is a tone, but B to C is only a semitone, which means that the pattern of a major scale, which we can see quite clearly with our C major scale, is that there are semitone steps between the 3rd note and the 4th note of the scale and the 7th note and the 8th note of the scale, and that applies to every single major scale. They always have a semitone step between the 3rd and the 4th and the 7th and the 8th. So what that means is this, that we've got the first 4 notes go up a tone and a semitone, and the next 4 notes do exactly the same. They go up a tone and a semitone. And so these two halves of the scale, these two lots of 4 notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, are identical in terms of their tone and semitone steps, and